She gave birth alone in the woods. The alpha found them and said, "You're mine." The scent of her own blood was going to get her killed. Lila pressed her back against the rough bark of a towering pine, her breath coming in sharp puffs that turned to white vapor in the frigid mountain air. Every muscle in her swollen body screamed in protest, but she couldn't stop. Not when Daxon's hunting party was less than a mile behind her, their wolf forms cutting through the snow like dark shadows against the moonlit landscape. Just a little further, she told herself, one trembling hand pressed to her enormous belly. Just until I find somewhere safe. But safe didn't exist. Not for someone like her. Not for someone carrying what the pack elders called the future of all shifter kind, in her womb. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her panic. Lila bit back a cry of pain and forced herself to keep moving through the dense forest. Her bare feet had gone numb hours ago, but she could still feel the warm stickiness of blood between her toes where rocks and thorns had torn through her skin. The thin hospital gown she'd escaped in offered no protection against the October mountain cold, and her long auburn hair whipped around her face as the wind picked up. Behind her, a wolf's howl pierced the night. Too close. Much too close. She can't have gone far. Daxon's voice carried on the wind, rough and commanding even in his human form. The bitch is ready to drop that pup any second. Find her. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been Beta Daxon's mate for 2 years. 2 years of hell disguised as protection. When the pack seer had announced that her unborn child carried the rare royal bloodline, everything changed. Daxon's eyes had turned cold and calculating. He'd started calling the baby his key to the throne, and making plans to challenge the current alpha once the child was born. But the baby wasn't his. The baby was hers. And she'd die before she let him use her child as a political pawn. Another contraction hit her like a freight train, doubling her over against a fallen log. Lila pressed her fist to her mouth to muffle her scream. The contractions had been coming for hours now, getting stronger and closer together. She didn't need to be a doctor to know that her time was almost up. Not here, she pleaded silently. Not in the open where they can find us. The sound of breaking branches made her freeze. Patrol wolves were moving through the forest in their shifted forms, their enhanced senses picking up every scent trail she'd left behind. They were probably following the smell of her blood, her fierce sweat, the unmistakable scent of a female about to give birth. Lila forced herself to move again, stumbling deeper into the wilderness. Her legs shook with each step, and dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. She'd been running for 6 hours straight after breaking out of the pack's medical facility. 6 hours through snow-covered mountains in nothing but a hospital gown and determination. The landscape around her grew more rugged as she climbed higher. Massive boulders jutted out from the mountainside, creating shadows and crevices that might offer shelter. Hope fluttered in her chest when she spotted a dark opening between 2 rocks. A small cave, barely large enough for one person, but it would have to do. She half fell, half crawled into the narrow space just as another contraction ripped through her body. This one was different, stronger, more urgent. Her water broke with a warm rush, and Lila knew with absolute certainty that there was no more running. Her baby was coming now. "Please," she whispered to the empty cave, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "Please let us be safe." Outside, the wind howled through the trees like a living thing. But underneath that sound, Lila could hear something else, the distant baying of wolves on the hunt. They were getting closer, following her trail with the ruthless efficiency that made shifter packs such formidable predators. She stripped off the hospital gown and used it to create a makeshift bed on the rocky cave floor. Her hands shook as she tried to remember everything she'd learned in the pack's birthing classes. Breathe through the contractions. Don't push until you can't help it. Try to stay calm. Calm. Right. As if giving birth alone in a freezing cave while being hunted by your psychotic ex-mate was any kind of calm. Another contraction built slowly, like a wave gathering strength before it crashed against the shore. Lila gripped the cave walls and tried to breathe through it, but the pain was overwhelming. It felt like her body was being torn apart from the inside. When it passed, she found herself thinking about the prophecy that had started all of this. The pack's ancient seer, a wizened old woman named Vera, had taken one look at Lila's ultrasound and gone pale as death. "This child," Vera had whispered, her cloudy eyes wide with fear and wonder. "This child carries the bloodline of the first alphas. The royal mark will appear at birth, a silver crescent moon on the left shoulder. Such a child hasn't been born in over 300 years. Daxon had been ecstatic. With a royal heir under his control, he could challenge any alpha in the region and probably win. The old bloodline still commanded respect and fear among shifter packs. A child with the royal mark could unite or destroy entire territories. But Lila didn't want her baby to be a weapon. She wanted her child to have a choice, to grow up free from the violent politics that dominated shifter society. The contractions were coming faster now, barely giving her time to catch her breath between them. Lila could feel the baby moving down, getting ready to enter the world whether she was ready or not. "It's okay, little one," she gasped, placing both hands on her belly. "We're going to be okay." Somehow, the sound of wolves howling erupted from multiple directions, much closer than before. They'd found her trail again. Panic shot through Lila's system, but there was nothing she could do now except pray that the cave was hidden enough to keep them safe until the baby was born. And then what? She had no plan beyond giving birth. No supplies, no safe place to go, no one she could trust. The royal bloodline made her baby valuable to every shifter pack in the region. They'd all want to control or eliminate the child before it could grow into its power. Another massive contraction hit, and this time Lila couldn't stop herself from screaming. The sound echoed off the cave walls, and she immediately clapped a hand over her mouth in horror. But it was too late. The damage was done. In the sudden silence that followed, she heard something that made her blood turn to ice. A single, long howl rose from the forest directly outside her cave. Not the hunting call she'd been hearing all night. This was different. Deeper. More powerful. It spoke of dominance and ancient authority. Of an alpha who feared nothing and commanded everything. And it was answered by a dozen other voices, creating a chorus that seemed to shake the very mountains. Lila closed her eyes and tried to disappear into the cave wall. Whatever was coming for her now, it wasn't Daxon's patrol. This was something much more dangerous, something that made her former mate's hunting party sound like playful pups. The baby kicked once more, as if eager to meet whatever fate awaited them both in the wilderness. As another contraction began to build, Lila could only hold her breath and pray that dawn would come before the wolves found her hiding place. But deep in her heart, she knew her time had run out. Dawn crept across the mountains like a reluctant witness, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and pink. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cave entrance, illuminating a scene that would have broken the heart of anyone who saw it. Lila lay unconscious on the cold stone floor, her face deathly pale and her breathing shallow. Beside her, wrapped in the torn remnants of her hospital gown, a tiny baby wailed with the fierce determination of someone who had fought to enter this world and won. The infant's cries echoed through the forest, piercing and insistent. To human ears, it might have sounded like any newborn's call for comfort. But to the enhanced senses of the shifters moving through the woods, it was a beacon that cut through every other scent and sound. Alpha Kieran Blackwood paused mid-stride, his head tilting as the unfamiliar sound reached him. He'd been tracking the scent of blood and fear for the past hour. Not because he cared about whoever was bleeding, but because injured prey often led to hungry predators. And predators sometimes crossed into his territory without permission. At 32, Kieran had the kind of presence that made other alphas think twice before challenging him. 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle, with dark hair that he kept deliberately unkempt and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. Scars crisscrossed his hands and forearms, souvenirs from years of fighting to keep his rogue pack alive in the wilderness. Alpha, his beta, Rowan, appeared beside him like a shadow. The younger man's sandy brown hair was still damp from his shift back to human form. That crying. I hear it. Kieran's voice was gravelly from years of giving orders that meant the difference between life and death. Fresh birth. Less than an hour old. The two men exchanged glances. Newborns in the wilderness meant only one thing. Someone was running from something bad enough to risk giving birth alone in the mountains. In Kieran's experience, that usually involved pack politics, territorial disputes, or worse. Could be a trap, Rowan suggested, though his tone was doubtful. Even among shifters, using a newborn as bait was considered beyond the pale. Could be Kieran started moving toward the sound again, his step silent despite his size. But if it's not, that baby won't last another hour in this cold. They found the cave within minutes, following the cries and the overwhelming scent of blood and birth fluid. Kieran's enhanced vision adjusted instantly to the dim interior, and what he saw made him freeze in the entrance. A young woman, barely more than a girl, really, lay crumpled on the stone floor. Auburn hair spread around her like spilled wine, and her skin had the waxy pallor of someone who'd lost too much blood. But it was the baby beside her that made Kieran's breath catch in his throat. The infant was perfect and healthy, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could probably be heard in the next county. But as Kieran's gaze traveled over the tiny form, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. There, on the baby's left shoulder, was a birthmark in the shape of a perfect silver crescent moon. Jesus Christ, Rowan breathed from behind him. Is that the royal mark? Kieran's voice was barely above a whisper. He'd only seen it once before, in an ancient book his grandfather had shown him as a child. The bloodline of the first alphas, the ones who'd ruled all shifter kind before the Great War tore their civilization apart. This wasn't just any baby. This was a child who could unite or destroy every pack in North America. Kieran's mind raced as he processed the implications. Someone had been desperate enough to flee into the wilderness while pregnant with a royal heir. That meant the child was either unwanted by their pack, unlikely, given the political value, or someone was trying to keep the baby from falling into the wrong hands. The sound of approaching footsteps made both men spin toward the cave entrance. Kieran's nostrils flared as he caught the scent of multiple shifters moving fast through the forest. Organized. Purposeful. A hunting party. Alpha Kieran. The voice that rang through the trees was rough and commanding, with the kind of arrogance that came from believing yourself untouchable. I know you're in there. Come out and we can discuss this like civilized men. Kieran recognized the voice, Beta Daxon from the Silver Ridge Pack, one of the most brutal and ambitious shifters in the region. If Daxon was here, hunting a woman and her newborn, then Kieran's instincts about the situation had been dead on. What do you want to do? Rowan's hand moved instinctively toward the hunting knife at his belt. Kieran looked down at the unconscious woman and her crying baby. In the growing daylight, he could see that she was young, maybe 25 at most. Pretty, in a delicate way that suggested she'd never known the harsh realities of rogue pack life. Her hands were soft, unmarked by the scars that came from fighting for survival. Royal bloodline or not, she was clearly someone's victim. And Kieran had spent the last 10 years of his life protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. But this was bigger than one woman's safety. A child with the royal mark could change everything. Could end the constant territorial wars that had decimated shifter populations for generations. Or it could make those wars 1,000 times worse if it fell into the hands of someone like Daxon. The footsteps were getting closer now. Kieran could hear at least 6 different heartbeats, all moving with the coordinated precision of trained soldiers. They'd be at the cave entrance within minutes. He made his decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Stepping out of the cave, Kieran faced the approaching hunting party with the kind of calm confidence that had kept him alive through a dozen territorial wars. Daxon stood at the front of the group, his pale blue eyes gleaming with barely controlled fury. "The woman and child are under my protection now," Kieran announced, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of an alpha who'd never backed down from a fight. Daxon's lip curled in a sneer. "That's my mate and my heir you're protecting, Blackwood. Hand them over, and we'll pretend this never happened." No, the word hung in the air like a challenge. Behind him, Kieran could hear the baby's cries growing weaker, exhaustion and cold taking their toll. The woman still hadn't stirred. They needed medical attention, food, warmth. Things that only a pack could provide. Daxon took a step forward, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You know what that child represents. You can't protect them forever." Kieran's eyes flashed gold as his wolf stirred just beneath the surface. When he spoke again, his voice carried the deep rumble of barely controlled power. "They're mine now." The words echoed through the forest like a declaration of war. The warmth hit Lila like a physical blow, dragging her back to consciousness with uncomfortable intensity. Her eyelids fluttered open to reveal rough-hewn wooden walls, a crackling fireplace, and the distinct smell of pine and wood smoke. For a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. After hours of freezing mountain cold, the cozy interior felt too good to be real. Then her baby's soft whimper from somewhere nearby sent panic shooting through her system. "Easy," a woman's voice, calm but guarded. "Don't try to sit up too fast. You lost a lot of blood." Lila turned her head carefully and saw a middle-aged woman with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She was stirring something that smelled like herbal tea, her movements efficient and no nonsense. But her dark eyes held the wariness of someone who'd seen too much violence to trust easily. "My baby." Lila's voice came out as a croak. "Right here." The woman gestured to a makeshift crib near the fireplace, where Lila's daughter lay sleeping, wrapped in clean blankets. "Healthy as a horse despite everything. You did good, getting her delivered safely." Relief flooded through Lila so intensely that tears sprang to her eyes. Her baby was alive. Safe. For now. "Where am I?" she managed to ask, though part of her was afraid of the answer. "Blackwood territory." The woman's tone suggested this should mean something significant. "I'm Sarah, the Pax healer. Alpha Kieran brought you here after your encounter with Daxon's hunting party." The memories came flooding back. The cave, the pain of giving birth alone, and then the sound of men's voices outside. She remembered a deep, authoritative voice declaring that she and her baby were under his protection, but everything after that was a blur of exhaustion and blood loss. "How long have I been unconscious?" 2 days. Sarah handed her a steaming mug. "Drink this. It'll help with the pain and get your strength back." As Lila sipped the bitter tea, she became aware of voices outside the cabin, multiple people talking in low, urgent tones. The conversation sounded heated, though she couldn't make out specific words. Sarah noticed her attention drift toward the window. "Pack meeting," she explained with a grimace. "You and your little one have caused quite a stir." Before Lila could ask what she meant, the cabin door swung open with enough force to rattle the hinges. A man stepped inside, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and steel-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about her in a single glance. Even sitting weakly in bed, Lila could feel the raw power radiating from him like heat from a bonfire. This had to be Alpha Kieran. "You're awake." His voice was the same one she remembered from outside the cave, deep, controlled, and completely unreadable. "Thank you." Lila struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at her still healing body. "For saving us. I don't know what would have happened if you'd be dead," Kieran interrupted bluntly. "And your daughter would be in Daxon's hands, being groomed as his weapon of choice." The casual way he stated the facts made Lila's stomach clench. She looked toward her sleeping baby, remembering Daxon's cold eyes and his plans for using the child's royal bloodline. You know about the mark. Hard to miss. Kieran moved closer, and Lila caught the scent of pine forests and something distinctly masculine. The question is, what exactly are you running from? And more importantly, what kind of trouble are you bringing to my pack? Before Lila could answer, the cabin door opened again. A younger man with sandy brown hair entered, followed by someone who made the temperature in the room seem to drop 10 degrees. The newcomer was shorter than Kieran but built like a fighter, with suspicious dark eyes and a permanent scowl etched into his weathered features. The councils reached a decision. The sandy-haired man, Rowan, she assumed from Sarah's earlier mention, announced to Kieran. Let me guess. Kieran's tone was dry. Yora wants to throw them to the wolves. The scowling man, Yora, stepped forward, his attention fixed on Lila with undisguised hostility. This isn't a joke, Kieran. That mark on the kid's shoulder makes her a target for every ambitious alpha from here to the Canadian border. Daxon's already sent word to 3 different packs, claiming you're harboring stolen property. She's not property, Kieran said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Tell that to the war party that's going to show up at our gates. Yora's hands clenched into fists. We've worked too hard to build something here, to keep our people safe from the political games those territorial packs play. And now you want to risk everything for some royal brat. Watch your mouth, Sarah snapped from across the room, surprising everyone. That royal brat is an innocent baby who never asked to be born into this mess. Yora rounded on her. Innocent or not, she's going to get us all killed. Mark my words. Within a week, we'll have half the shifter population of the Pacific Northwest breathing down our necks. All because our alpha decided to play hero. Enough. Kieran's single word cut through the argument like a blade. My decision stands. The woman and child stay under pack protection. And what happens when the Riverside pack comes calling? Yora demanded. Or the Mountain Crest wolves. They'll all want a piece of that royal bloodline. You think we can fight them all? Lila watched the exchange with growing horror. These people were arguing about her baby like she was a valuable commodity, rather than a living child. Worse, their arguments weren't wrong. She knew better than anyone how desperately the various packs would want control over a royal heir. You don't understand, she said, her voice stronger now despite her physical weakness. I'm not asking you to start a war. I just want my daughter to have a chance at a normal life. Yora laughed harshly. Normal? Lady, that ship sailed the moment she was born with that mark. There's no such thing as normal for royal blood. There could be, Rowan interjected thoughtfully. If we handle this right, a royal bloodline allied with our pack could bring stability to the region. End some of the territorial fighting. Or make it 1,000 times worse, Yora countered. Every pack with ambitions will want to either control or eliminate her. We'll be fighting wars until she's old enough to choose a mate, and then we'll be fighting wars over who gets that honor. Lila felt sick. This was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. Her child being treated like a political pawn rather than a person. What if I leave? She asked quietly. Take my daughter and disappear. Would that solve your problem? The room fell silent. Kieran studied her face with those penetrating gray eyes, as if trying to read her thoughts. Where would you go? Daxon's put word out to every pack within 500 miles. There's nowhere you could hide that someone wouldn't eventually find you. Then what do you suggest? Lila's voice was barely above a whisper. We protect you both, Rowan said firmly. It's the right thing to do. Right doesn't keep people alive, Yora shot back. Smart does. And the smart move is to hand her over before this gets out of control. Kieran held up a hand for silence, his gaze never leaving Lila's face. Tell me about Daxon. How long were you with his pack? What made you run? Lila hesitated. The full truth was complicated and ugly, and she wasn't sure how much she could trust these people. But with her daughter's life hanging in the balance, she didn't have much choice. 2 years, she began slowly. I was human when I met him. He said he loved me, wanted to protect me. But after I got pregnant and the seer identified the royal bloodline, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He changed, Kieran guessed. He started calling the baby his key to the throne, made plans to challenge other alphas once she was born. I realized he'd never loved me. I was just a vessel for producing the heir he needed. Something flickered in Kieran's eyes. And you decided to run rather than let him use your child. I decided my daughter deserved better than being a weapon in someone else's war. The baby chose that moment to wake up, her soft cries filling the tense silence. Without thinking, Lila started to get up, but Sarah was already moving toward the crib. I've got her, the healer said gently, scooping up the infant and bringing her to Lila. As Lila cradled her daughter, she noticed Kieran watching them both with an unreadable expression. Whatever he was thinking, she couldn't tell if it was good or bad for their future. The Pack Council will meet again tomorrow, he announced finally. Until then, you both stay here under guard. For your protection and ours. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Lila to wonder if she'd just found sanctuary or simply traded one prison for another. 300 miles south of Kieran's territory, Beta Daxon Mercer stood in the war room of the Silver Ridge Pack compound, his pale blue eyes fixed on a detailed map of the Pacific Northwest. Red pins marked confirmed sightings of his escaped mate, while black pins showed potential hiding spots. The yellow pins, those marked the packs he'd already contacted, spreading his carefully crafted version of events. Still nothing from the northern search teams, reported his lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Cole. But we've got confirmation that Blackwood's pack took her in. 3 separate sources. Daxon's jaw clenched. Of course it would be Kieran Blackwood, the one alpha in the region with enough arrogance to interfere in another pack's business. The rogue alpha thought his isolated territory made him untouchable, but Daxon had news for him. What's our force strength? Daxon asked, not taking his eyes off the map. 43 fighters, plus the allies from Mountain Crest Pack. Alpha Marcus promised another 20 wolves if we need them. Cole hesitated. But sir, going after Blackwood directly might not be the smartest move. His pack's small, but they're all veterans. They've been fighting territorial wars for a decade. Then we don't go after him directly. Daxon turned from the map, his expression calculating. We make sure every pack in the region understands what's at stake. We make Kieran Blackwood look like the threat to stability that he is. The war room door opened, and a young man slipped inside, barely 21, with the same auburn hair as Lila but none of her gentle features. Aaron's green eyes darted nervously around the room, before settling on Daxon. You wanted to see me, Beta? Aaron, Daxon's voice warmed slightly, though the smile he offered didn't reach his eyes. My future brother-in-law. Come in, son. We need to discuss your sister's situation. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. He'd been part of Daxon's pack for only 6 months, ever since his human parents died in a car accident and left him with nowhere else to go. Lila had begged Daxon to take her brother in, and the Beta had agreed, though not out of kindness. Is she really safe? Aaron asked quietly. The baby, I mean. I know Lila was scared, but... Scared of what she didn't understand. Daxon interrupted smoothly. Your sister got some bad advice from people who don't appreciate what her child represents. Do you know what a royal bloodline means, Aaron? The young man shook his head, though something in his expression suggested he'd heard whispers. Daxon moved to a bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound volume. Ancient text about shifter history and bloodlines. This mark your niece carries? It hasn't appeared in over 300 years. The last child born with the Royal Crescent became the greatest alpha our kind has ever known. She united 12 separate packs and brought peace to the entire eastern seaboard. But Lila said. Lila's human. Daxon cut him off. She doesn't understand pack politics or what's best for shifter society. That baby could end the territorial wars that kill dozens of our people every year. But only if she's raised properly, by someone who understands the responsibility. Aaron looked down at his hands. You think Lila can't raise her own daughter? I think Lila's running scared and making decisions that could get people killed. Daxon's voice hardened slightly. Including herself and the baby. Do you know what Kieran Blackwood's pack is? They're rogues, Aaron. Outcasts who live like animals in the wilderness. No medical facilities, no proper education for children, no protection from the elements. Is that what you want for your niece? The young man's face paled. No, of course not. But if Lila doesn't want to come back. Sometimes people need to be protected from their own poor judgment. Daxon placed a paternal hand on Aaron's shoulder. I'm not the bad guy here, son. I'm trying to save your family. But I need your help to do it. Aaron looked up, conflict clear in his green eyes. What kind of help? Instead of answering directly, Daxon gestured to Cole, who spread out a detailed topographical map of Blackwood territory. We need intelligence about their defenses, their patrol patterns, the layout of their compound. Information that could save lives if this turns into a confrontation. You want me to spy on my sister? I want you to help me bring her home safely. Daxon's voice was patient, reasonable. Think about it, Aaron. What happens when winter really sets in? When the baby gets sick and there's no proper medical care? When other packs decide they want that royal heir for themselves? Kieran Blackwood can't protect them forever. The young man stared at the map, his internal struggle visible on his face. If I do this, you promise Lila and the baby won't be hurt? You have my word. The lie came easily to Daxon's lips. All I want is my family back where they belong. Aaron was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Get close to their territory. Scout their defenses. Find out how many fighters they have, where they're vulnerable. Daxon pointed to several locations on the map. Can you handle that? I think so. Aaron's voice was barely above a whisper. When do you want me to go? Tonight. The sooner we have intelligence, the sooner we can plan a rescue mission. After Aaron left to prepare, Cole moved closer to his beta. You sure we can trust him? He's still her brother. He's young and stupid, but he genuinely thinks he's helping her. Daxon's expression turned cold as winter. Besides, once we have what we need from him, his usefulness ends. The war room door opened again, and another pack member entered. This one carrying a satellite phone. Beta, I've got Alpha Marcus from Mountain Crest on the line. He wants an update on the situation. Daxon took the phone, his demeanor shifting into what he privately called his concerned leader voice. Marcus, good to hear from you. I hope you've considered my proposal. I have. The voice on the other end was gravelly and suspicious. But I need to understand what we're really dealing with here. You're asking me to commit fighters to a conflict with Blackwood's pack. That's not something I do lightly. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't necessary. Daxon moved back to the map, tracing territorial boundaries with his finger. But this goes beyond one runaway mate. That royal bloodline represents a shift in the balance of power. If Kieran Blackwood gets his hands on it, he could use it to legitimize his claim to expand his territory. Your territory included. There was silence on the other end of the line then. You're saying he wants to make himself a regional alpha? I'm saying a man who's spent 10 years building a rogue pack doesn't rescue random women out of the goodness of his heart. Daxon let that sink in before continuing. Think about it, Marcus. Why else would he risk a confrontation with my pack over a woman and child he doesn't even know? Shit, the word was explosive. If he's planning a territorial expansion, then every pack in the region becomes a target. Starting with the ones closest to his current holdings, Daxon smiled coldly. I'm not asking you to help me get my mate back, Marcus. I'm asking you to help me stop a potential war before it starts. What do you need? Intelligence first, force second. I've got someone on the inside who can get us information about their defenses. Once we know what we're dealing with, we can plan accordingly. Keep me informed. If Blackwood really is planning something, we need to move fast. After ending the call, Daxon stared at the map with satisfaction. 3 packs now believed that Kieran Blackwood was a threat to regional stability. By tomorrow he'd have contacted 2 more. By the end of the week, the rogue Alpha would find himself surrounded by enemies who thought they were preventing a war. And somewhere in the middle of it all, his royal heir would come home where she belonged. Cole, he called to his lieutenant. Send word to our contacts in the Riverside Pack. I think it's time Alpha Janet learned about the dangers of harboring fugitives. The hunt was about to become a siege. The morning sun filtered through the cabin windows as Lila carefully changed her daughter's diaper, her movements becoming more confident with each passing day. It had been a week since she'd awakened in Kieran's territory, and her strength was slowly returning. The baby, she'd finally settled on the name Luna, was thriving despite their rough start. You're looking better, Sarah observed from the doorway, carrying a basket of medical supplies. Colors back in your cheeks. I feel better. Lila secured Luna's blanket and lifted her daughter, breathing in that distinctive newborn scent. Strong enough to be useful, actually. I hate just sitting here while everyone else works. Sarah's expression softened slightly. In the past week, she'd watched Lila with the careful attention of someone evaluating a potential threat. What she'd seen was a young woman who asked for nothing beyond basic necessities, and spent most of her time quietly caring for her baby. Kieran's got the flu, Sarah said carefully. Came down with it yesterday. Half the pack's fighting the same bug, and I'm running low on hands. If you're serious about helping. I am. Lila's response was immediate. What do you need me to do? An hour later, Lila found herself in the pack's makeshift medical bay, a converted storage building that smelled of antiseptic and pine needles. 3 fighters lay on cots, their faces flushed with fever. In the corner, 2 pack children whimpered with the same illness. Just keep them comfortable, Sarah instructed, handing Lila a basin of cool water and several clean cloths. Change the wet compresses every 20 minutes, make sure they stay hydrated. Nothing fancy. Lila nodded and got to work. The injured warriors, 2 men and a woman, watched her with suspicious eyes at first. She was still an outsider, after all, someone who'd brought danger to their doorstep. But as she gently bathed their foreheads and offered sips of water, their wariness began to fade. You don't have to do this, muttered the female fighter, a tough-looking woman named Maya. We can take care of ourselves. I know, Lila replied simply, wringing out a cloth. But you shouldn't have to when you're feeling miserable. Maya studied her face, searching for hidden motives. Why? We're not exactly welcoming committee material. Lila paused in her work, considering the question. Because you're protecting my daughter. Because someone showed me kindness when I had nowhere else to turn. Because it's the right thing to do. The simplicity of her answer seemed to surprise Maya more than any elaborate explanation might have. As the day progressed, Lila found herself moving between the medical bay and the pack's common areas. When she wasn't tending to the sick fighters, she was helping with the children, reading stories, playing simple games, and offering the kind of gentle attention that harried pack members often couldn't spare. It was while she was helping a 6-year-old boy named Tommy with his letters that Kieran appeared in the doorway of the children's lodge. Even sick, he cut an imposing figure. Though Lila noticed the way he leaned slightly against the doorframe and the flush across his cheekbones. You should be resting, she said without looking up from Tommy's writing practice. So should you. You just gave birth 8 days ago. Kieran's voice was rougher than usual, hoarse from the flu. I'm fine. You look like death warmed over. Lila glanced up at him, then back at Tommy's careful letters. Sarah's got willow bark tea brewing. It'll help with the fever. For a moment, Kieran just watched her. This human woman who'd appeared in his territory with a royal baby, and somehow ended up reading children's books while his fighters recovered from illness. There was something unsettling about how naturally she fit into pack life, how easily his people had begun to accept her presence. Miss Lila, look. Tommy held up his paper proudly. I wrote my whole name. That's wonderful. Lila's face lit up with genuine pleasure. You're getting so good at this. Pretty soon you'll be reading the big kid books. Tommy beamed and ran off to show his achievement to another child. Lila started to stand, but a wave of dizziness made her sway. Kieran was beside her in an instant, his strong hands steadying her shoulders. Easy, he murmured, and she caught the scent of him, forest and rain and something uniquely masculine. You're pushing too hard. I'm okay, she protested, but didn't pull away from his touch. Just moved too fast. They stood like that for a moment, closer than they'd been since the day he'd brought her to his territory. Lila found herself studying his face, the sharp cheekbones, the gray eyes that seemed to see everything, the mouth that looked like it smiled rarely but meant it when it did. Why are you helping them? Kieran asked quietly. My people. You could just stay in your cabin. Keep your head down until this situation resolves itself. Is that what you'd prefer? I don't know. The honesty in his voice surprised them both. It would be simpler if you stayed hidden away. Easier to think of you as a problem to solve rather than. Rather than what? Before Kieran could answer, an ancient voice spoke from the lodge entrance. Rather than someone who might belong here. They turned to see an elderly woman making her way slowly into the room. She was tiny and bent with age, her white hair braided with colored beads, and her cloudy eyes held the kind of wisdom that came from seeing too much of the world's pain and beauty. Elder Vera, Kieran said, moving away from Lila to help the old woman to a chair. You shouldn't be out of bed. This flu doesn't touch me, boy. I'm too old and ornery for germs. Vera's gaze fixed on Lila with unnerving intensity. So you're the one causing all the fuss. Mother of the marked child. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. You're the seer. Among other things, Vera gestured for her to come closer. Let me see this baby everyone's so worked up about. Luna was sleeping peacefully in her carrier, one tiny fist curled near her face. As Vera leaned over her, the silver crescent mark on the baby's shoulder seemed to catch the light, gleaming like actual metal. Ah, the old woman breathed. There it is. The mark of endings and beginnings. What do you mean? Lila asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Vera straightened slowly, her cloudy eyes distant. There is a prophecy, child. Ancient words spoken by the first seers of our kind. When the silver moon rises again upon mortal flesh, the daughter of two worlds shall stand at the crossroads of fate. In her hands lies the choice, unity or ruin, peace or endless war. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kieran's expression had gone carefully blank, but Lila could see the tension in his shoulders. What does that mean? She whispered. It means your daughter will either save our kind or destroy it, Vera said simply. And the choice of which path she takes may not be hers alone. Lila felt the world tilt around her. Whose choice is it? Vera's gaze shifted to Kieran, and her meaning became crystal clear. The alpha who chose to protect or eliminate the child would shape not just Luna's fate, but the future of all shifter kind. I should go, Lila said suddenly, clutching Luna's carrier. We should leave before. Before what? Kieran's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. Before I decide your daughter is too dangerous to live. The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Lila stared at him, searching his face for some hint of his intentions. But Kieran's expression remained unreadable, his gray eyes giving away nothing of the war she suspected was raging in his mind. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of approaching vehicles. multiple engines moving fast through the forest toward their territory. Kieran's head snapped toward the sound, his nostrils flaring as he caught scents that made his expression darken. "Rowan," he called, his alpha voice carrying clearly through the lodge. The beta appeared within seconds. "I smell them too. At least 3 different packs, moving in formation." "Daxon?" Kieran asked. "Among others." Lila's blood turned to ice. The hunting party she'd been dreading had finally arrived, and now Kieran had to decide. Was her daughter worth going to war for? Or was it time to cut his losses before the prophecy could come true? The council meeting that night was unlike any Kieran had presided over in his 10 years as Alpha. The tension in the main lodge was thick enough to cut, with pack members clustered in distinct groups that spoke volumes about their divided loyalties. The approaching scent trails had dispersed without confrontation, but everyone knew it was just a matter of time before the hunters returned in greater numbers. Lila sat in the back corner, Luna sleeping in her arms, trying to make herself invisible. She could feel the weight of dozens of stares, some sympathetic, others openly hostile. The prophecy Vera had shared earlier hung over the gathering like a storm cloud. 3 separate packs circling our territory, Rowan reported grimly. Mountain Crest from the south, Riverside from the east, and Silver Ridge from the west. They're not moving in yet, but they're coordinating. This isn't random. It's a siege. Yora spat from his position near the fire. The scarred warrior had been growing more vocal in his opposition each day. "They're trying to box us in, force us to surrender the woman and child or face a 3-front war." "Let them come," growled Maya, still pale from her recent illness but fierce as ever. "We've faced worse odds." "Have we?" Yora rounded on her. When have we ever faced 3 full packs at once over something that isn't even our fight?" The argument that followed was heated and ugly, with voices raised and old grievances aired. Kieran let it continue for several minutes, watching his pack tear itself apart over a decision that was ultimately his to make. When he finally stood, the room fell silent. "Enough," his alpha voice carried absolute authority. "We don't make decisions based on fear." "This isn't fear, it's common sense," Yora shot back, his usual deference forgotten in his anger. "That baby is a weapon of mass destruction waiting to happen. Every ambitious alpha in the country is going to want to control or eliminate her. Is that really the legacy you want for this pack?" Before Kieran could respond, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. The sound of someone being challenged by the perimeter guards, followed by a familiar voice calling out in distress. "Please. I just want to see my sister. I'm not armed." Lila's heart stopped. She knew that voice, had heard it every day for 20 years before circumstances tore her family apart. "Aaron," she whispered. Rowan was already moving toward the door. "I'll handle it." "No." Lila stood quickly, Luna stirring in her arms. "That's my brother. He must have tracked us somehow." Kieran's expression was unreadable. "Your brother works for Daxon's pack. He's just a kid. Daxon took him in after our parents died." Lila's voice was pleading. "He wouldn't. He's probably just worried about me." The alpha studied her face for a long moment, then nodded to Rowan. "Bring him in." Carefully. Minutes later, Aaron was escorted into the lodge by 2 guards. He looked younger than his 21 years, his auburn hair disheveled and his green eyes wide with what appeared to be genuine distress. When he saw Lila, his face crumpled with relief. "Lila. Thank God you're okay." He moved toward her, but the guards kept him at a careful distance. "I've been so worried. When Daxon said you'd run off into the wilderness." "How did you find me?" Lila asked, though she wanted nothing more than to hug her little brother. "I've been searching for days. Following rumors, asking questions." Aaron's gaze shifted to Luna, and his expression softened. "Is this her? My niece?" "Her name is Luna." Lila's voice was cautious. Something felt off about this whole situation. though she couldn't put her finger on what. Kieran stepped forward, his presence immediately dominating the space. You're in Blackwood territory without permission, boy. That usually ends badly. Aaron swallowed hard but didn't back down. I just want to help my sister. Daxon's been telling everyone that you kidnapped her, but I know Lila. She wouldn't stay anywhere she didn't want to be. Smart kid. Yora muttered sarcastically. Too bad his judgment in pack affiliations sucks. I didn't choose Daxon, Aaron said quietly. I had nowhere else to go after the accident. But Lila, she's the only family I have left. If she wants to stay here, then I want to stay too. The plea was so earnest, so desperate, that several pack members exchanged sympathetic glances. Even Kieran's expression softened slightly. It's not that simple, the Alpha said. Your presence here complicates things. Daxon will claim we're harboring his pack members. Then I'll renounce my allegiance to Silver Ridge, Aaron's voice was firm. Publicly, if necessary. I choose my sister over him. Lila felt tears prick her eyes. After everything that had happened, the thought of having her brother back, having some piece of her old life, was almost overwhelming. Let him stay, she said softly. Please. I'll vouch for him. The council erupted in debate again, but this time the division was even more pronounced. Some saw Aaron's arrival as proof that the situation was spiraling out of control. Others argued that turning away family members would make them no better than the territorial packs they opposed. Yora used the chaos to his advantage. This is exactly what I'm talking about, he shouted over the din. First we take in a woman with a target on her back, now we're collecting refugees from enemy packs. Where does it end, Kieran? How many people have to die for your conscience? Watch your tone, Kieran warned, but Yora was past caring about protocol. No, I've watched long enough. I've watched you risk everything we've built for strangers. I've watched our enemies gather at our borders while you play protector to people who bring nothing but danger. Yora turned to address the pack directly. How many of you are willing to die for this woman's child? How many of your own children are you willing to sacrifice? The question hit home. Lila could see it in the faces around her. Parents calculating risks, fighters weighing loyalty against survival. The unity that had held this pack together for a decade was cracking under the pressure. I call for a leadership challenge, Yora announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the lodge. The Alpha has lost perspective. He's putting personal feelings above pack safety. The silence that followed was deafening. Leadership challenges were rare in shifter society, usually reserved for times of crisis when an Alpha's judgment was seriously questioned. If enough pack members supported the challenge, Kieran would be forced to fight for his position. And if he lost, Lila and Luna would be handed over to Daxon within hours. Kieran's expression was dangerous now, his wolf rising close to the surface. Anyone else want to question my leadership? Several pack members looked away, but a few met his gaze steadily. The fracture in his authority was visible now, impossible to ignore. Lila felt sick. This was exactly what she'd feared. Good people turning against each other because of her presence. She caught Aaron's eye across the room and saw something there that made her blood run cold. Her brother was watching the proceedings with too much interest, too much calculation for someone who'd supposedly just arrived. As the council dissolved into smaller arguments and accusations, Lila made a decision. She couldn't let Kieran's pack destroy itself over her and Luna. Tomorrow night, when the guards were focused on the external threats, she would take her daughter and disappear into the wilderness. It was better to face the dangers alone than to watch good people suffer for her choices. But as she held Luna close and watched her brother's face in the firelight, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that the greatest danger might not be outside the pack's borders after all. It might already be inside. The attack came at 3 in the morning, when the moon was nothing but a thin silver sliver in the star-filled sky. Lila jerked awake to the sound of Luna crying and something else. A low rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cabin. Outside, she could hear shouts and the distinctive crack of gunfire. Her blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. They'd found them. She scooped Luna from her crib and pressed against the cabin wall, trying to stay away from the windows. Through the glass, she could see flashes of light, muzzle flares and the glow of shifted wolves' eyes reflecting the chaos. The attack was coordinated and brutal, hitting multiple points around the pack's perimeter simultaneously. "Lila!" Aaron's voice called from outside her door, urgent and frightened. "Open up. We need to get you out of here." Relief flooded through her. Whatever else was happening, at least her brother was safe. She rushed to unlock the door, Luna clutched protectively to her chest. Aaron stood in the doorway, but something was wrong. His clothes were too clean for someone caught in a surprise attack, and his eyes held a guilt that made her stomach drop. "Aaron," she whispered. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Lila. But you have to come with me. Right now." Before she could process what he meant, rough hands grabbed her from behind. 2 Silver Ridge fighters had been waiting beside the door, hidden in the shadows. One of them pressed a cloth over her nose and mouth, something chemical and sweet that made her vision blur almost immediately. "No," she gasped, struggling against them. "Eren, please." "It's for your own good," her brother said, tears streaming down his face. "Daxon promised you wouldn't be hurt. He just wants his family back." The drug was pulling her under, but Lila fought it with every ounce of strength she had. Through the growing haze, she could see the pack's main lodge burning in the distance. Bodies moved in the firelight, fighters locked in deadly combat, the larger forms of shifted wolves tearing through the darkness. "Kieran," she tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing she saw was Aaron's anguished face as he followed the Silver Ridge fighters into the forest. When Lila woke, she was tied to a chair in what looked like a military command tent. Harsh electric lights hung from the ceiling, and maps covered every surface. Luna lay in a portable crib nearby, mercifully unharmed and sleeping peacefully. "Welcome back, my dear." Daxon emerged from the shadows, looking exactly as she remembered, tall, lean, and predatory, with pale blue eyes that never showed an ounce of genuine warmth. He'd cleaned up since she'd last seen him, trading his usual casual clothes for military fatigues that made him look like the warlord he truly was. "You bastard," Lila spat, pulling against the ropes binding her wrists. "You used my brother." "I gave your brother a choice," Daxon corrected calmly. "Help me bring you home safely, or watch me level Blackwood's entire territory to get to you. He chose wisely. Where is he now?" Somewhere safe. Regretting his decisions, Daxon moved closer, his gaze shifting to Luna. "But enough about family drama. Let me see my daughter." "She's not your daughter." Lila's voice was fierce despite her helpless position. "You have no claim on her." "I have every claim. 2 years as your mate, legal bonding under pack law. And the fact that I'm the only thing standing between her and a dozen other alphas who'd love to get their hands on royal blood." Daxon reached toward Luna's crib, but stopped when Lila bared her teeth at him like a feral animal. "Touching. The maternal instinct is strong in you," he straightened, his expression turning cold. "But misguided. That child represents power beyond anything you can comprehend. In the right hands, she could unite every shifter pack in North America. In the wrong hands, she could start a war," Lila finished. "I know. But she's just a baby. She deserves the chance to choose her own path. Choice is a luxury we can't afford. Not with something this important." The tent flap burst open with enough force to tear the fabric. Kieran strode inside, his clothes torn and bloody from the battle outside, his gray eyes blazing with fury. Behind him came Rowan and 2 other pack members, all looking like they'd fought their way through hell to get here. "Let them go, Daxon." Kieran's voice was deadly quiet. This ends now. Daxon smiled, but there was no humor in it. Little brother, I was wondering when you'd show up. The words hit the tent like a physical blow. Lila's eyes widened as she looked between the two men, seeing for the first time the similarities she'd missed before. The same sharp cheekbones, the same stubborn set to their jaws, the same predatory grace in their movements. Brothers, she breathed. Didn't tell her about our family history? Daxon asked mockingly. How disappointing, Kieran. I thought you'd learn to be more honest about your past. Kieran's hands clenched into fists. That was a long time ago. Not long enough. Daxon's expression turned ugly with old hatred. I still remember the day you chose your precious independence over family loyalty. Left me to clean up the mess when the Riverside Pack attacked our territory. You started that war. Kieran's composure cracked, revealing years of buried pain. You and your goddamn ambition. I tried to negotiate peace, and you sabotaged every attempt because you wanted to prove you were worthy of being alpha. And where did your peace talks get us? 43 dead, including our parents. Daxon's voice rose to a roar. You abandoned us when we needed you most. The pieces clicked into place for Lila. Two brothers from the same pack, torn apart by a territorial war that had shaped both their futures. Kieran had become a rogue alpha, sworn to avoid the political games that destroyed families. Daxon had embraced those same games, determined to never be vulnerable again. This isn't about the past, Kieran said, though his voice shook with emotion. This is about an innocent woman and child who don't deserve to be pawns in your power games. Everything is about the past. Daxon pulled out a pistol, pointing it at Kieran but keeping his eyes on Luna. That child is my chance to fix what you broke. To build something lasting instead of hiding in the wilderness like a coward. I'm not hiding anymore. Kieran took a step forward, ignoring the weapon. And I won't let you turn that baby into another casualty of your war. Our war, Daxon corrected. It started the day you walked away from your responsibilities. The two brothers faced each other across the tent, years of resentment and grief crackling between them like electricity. Lila could see the family resemblance clearly now, not just in their physical features, but in the bone-deep stubbornness that had driven them apart and kept them apart for over a decade. Please, she said quietly, her voice cutting through their confrontation. Don't do this. Don't let your past destroy her future. Both men looked at her, then at Luna sleeping peacefully in her crib, unaware that her fate hung in the balance between two brothers who'd lost everything to pride and pain. Some things can't be forgiven, Daxon said finally, his gun still trained on Kieran. No, Kieran agreed, his gray eyes never leaving his brother's face. But maybe they can be ended. The tent fell silent except for Luna's soft breathing and the distant sounds of the battle still raging outside. Two brothers, two alphas, two different visions of what their world could become, all balanced on the edge of a moment that would change everything. The choice of whether to break the cycle or continue it hung in the air like a blade, waiting to fall. The silence stretched between the two brothers like a taut wire, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. Daxon's finger tightened on the trigger, his pale blue eyes calculating the distance between himself and Kieran. Outside the tent, the sounds of battle were dying down, either because one side had won, or because the fighters were too exhausted to continue. Don't do this, Daxon. Lila's voice was steady despite the ropes cutting into her wrists. This isn't about me or Luna anymore. This is about you and Kieran, and a war that ended 10 years ago. It never ended, Daxon snarled, though his gaze flickered toward her. It just went underground, festering like an infected wound. Then heal it. Lila leaned forward as much as her bonds would allow. Break the cycle. Choose something different. Kieran took another careful step forward. She's right. We've been fighting the same battle for years, hurting innocent people because we're too stubborn to let go of old grievances. Easy words from someone who's never had to rebuild from ashes, But there was something different in Daxon's voice now. A crack in the certainty that had driven him for so long. "I've built something," Kieran said quietly. "A pack that doesn't need to conquer others to survive. People who choose loyalty instead of having it forced on them. You could have that too." "Could I?" Daxon's laugh was bitter. "After everything I've done? After the alliances I've made, the promises I've broken?" He gestured toward the tent entrance. "Half the packs in the region are out there right now, expecting me to deliver on my word to unite them under one banner. Your banner, once I eliminate you." Kieran's expression softened slightly. "Then walk away. Take your supporters and disappear. Start over somewhere else, like I did. And let you claim victory." "There is no victory here," Kieran said firmly. "Only choices. And consequences." Luna stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up. Both brothers looked toward her automatically, and Lila saw something shift in Daxon's expression. For just a moment, he looked like what he could have been, a protector instead of a conqueror. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "I can see why you'd want to shield her from all this." "She doesn't have to be a weapon," Lila said urgently. "She could be a bridge instead. Between packs, between the old ways and something better." "Bridges get walked on," Daxon replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Kieran took another step, close enough now that Daxon could have pulled the trigger and ended everything. Or they connect worlds that were never meant to be separated. For a long moment, the only sound was Luna's quiet murmuring as she began to wake. Then Daxon slowly lowered his weapon, his shoulders sagging as if a weight he'd carried for years was finally too heavy to bear. "I'm tired," he admitted. "So goddamn tired of fighting battles that never end." Kieran nodded, understanding flooding his gray eyes. "Then stop fighting them." "It's not that simple. The alliances I've made, the promises, can be broken." Kieran's voice was firm. "The packs following you aren't loyal to your cause, Daxon. They're afraid of losing their territory to someone else's ambition. Give them a way out, and most of them will take it." Daxon was quiet for so long that Lila began to worry he was planning something desperate. Then he walked over to her chair and cut her bonds with a swift motion of his knife. "Go to your daughter," he said simply. Lila didn't need to be told twice. She rushed to Luna's crib, gathering her baby close and breathing in that precious scent that meant everything was still okay. When she looked up, she found both brothers watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I disappear," Daxon said, holstering his weapon. "Find some territory far from here, and try to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to prove myself worthy of something I never really wanted." Kieran extended his hand to his brother, not as an enemy, but as family. "There's another way. Stay. Help me build something better than what we grew up with." Daxon stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then shook his head. "Too much blood between us, brother. Maybe someday, but not now." He looked at Lila, then at Luna. "Take care of them. They deserve better than the world we've made." "They'll have it," Kieran promised. Daxon nodded once, then turned toward the tent entrance. He paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. "The packs outside will scatter once they realize I'm gone. Most of them never wanted a real fight anyway." And then he was gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost finally laid to rest. Kieran immediately went to Lila, his hands gentle as he checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Did he?" "I'm fine," she assured him, though her voice shook slightly. "Luna's fine too. But Aaron is being held under guard back at the territory. He'll face consequences for his choices, but nothing permanent." Kieran's expression was grim. "He's young and was manipulated. That counts for something." Lila sagged with relief. Whatever happened next, her family would survive this. As they made their way out of the tent, Lila saw that Kieran had been right about the attacking forces. Without Daxon to coordinate them, the alliance was already falling apart. Vehicles were pulling away in different directions, taking their fighters home to territories that no longer seemed worth defending. The journey back to Blackwood territory took several hours, but when they finally arrived, the entire pack was waiting for them. Even in the early morning light, Lila could see faces filled with relief, concern, and something else, acceptance. Kieran helped her down from the vehicle, Luna still sleeping peacefully in her arms. As the pack gathered around them, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. Lila and her daughter are under my protection, he announced, his Alpha authority ringing clear. They are part of this pack now, part of this family. They will never be pawns in anyone's war again. The cheer that went up was spontaneous and heartfelt. Even Yora, who had opposed their presence so vehemently, stepped forward with something like respect in his eyes. Welcome home, he said simply. As the pack began to disperse, returning to their normal routines after the long night of crisis, Kieran caught Lila's hand. His fingers were warm and calloused from years of hard work, but gentle as they intertwined with hers. Is that what this is? She asked softly. Home. If you want it to be, his gray eyes held hope and something deeper, something that had been growing between them since the day he'd found her in that cave. I can't promise it will be easy. There will always be challenges, people who see Luna's bloodline as an opportunity or a threat. But you'll never face them alone. Lila looked around at the faces surrounding them. Sarah smiling as she prepared to check on Luna, Rowan organizing repair crews for the damage from the attack, children playing despite the recent chaos. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she'd chosen. Yes, she said, her voice strong and certain. This is home. As Kieran squeezed her hand and Luna stirred awake to see sunlight streaming through the forest canopy, Lila felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope for the future. The prophecy still hung over them, and Luna would still face choices that could shape the fate of all shifter kind. But she would make those choices surrounded by love, protected by a pack that valued unity over conquest, raised by people who understood that true strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The old bloodlines and ancient grudges hadn't disappeared overnight, but they no longer seemed quite so important. What mattered was the new bonds being forged, between a rogue alpha and a woman who'd lost everything, between a pack of outcasts and the child who might unite them all, between brothers who'd chosen reconciliation over revenge. In the end, love had proven stronger than legacy, and that, Lila thought as she watched Kieran smile down at Luna, was the greatest magic of all.